So let's start with atomic habits, an easy and proven way to build good habits and break bad ones. The fundamentals. Why tiny changes make a big difference. The surprising power of atomic habits. One day in 2003, the fate of British cycling changed. Since 1908, British riders had only won one gold medal at the Olympic Games. Throughout the 110 years, no British cyclist ever won the Tour de France. The performance of British riders was so underwhelmed that top bike manufacturers wouldn't sell bikes to the team in fear that it would ruin their reputation. But when the organization, the governing body for professional cycling in Britain, hired David Brailsford, he was finally able to put an end to that. What made him different from the other coaches was his commitment to his strategy. He referred to it as the aggregation of marginal gains, which was the philosophy of searching for a tiny margin of improvement in every little thing you do. And so he started with making very small adjustments in the team, like redesigning the bike seats to make it more comfortable. They asked the riders to wear electrically heated overshorts to keep ideal muscle temperature and rubbed alcohol on the tire for better grip. And so much more. As these and many more small improvements accumulated, there were better results. And the team won the road and track cycling events at the 2008 Olympic Games in Beijing. How does this happen? How does a team of ordinary athletes change into world champions only by making very tiny changes that everyone from afar probably thought they wouldn't make a difference? Improvements, even if it's only 1%, are usually never noticed. But they are definitely more meaningful when you look at them after years and years of 1% improvements. Here's how it works in math. If you can be 1% better each day for 1 year, you'll end up 37 times better by the time you're done. Habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. They barely seem to make any difference on any day, but the effect they leave after months is definitely noticeable. Unfortunately, though, their slow pace of change makes a way for bad habits to get away. If you eat an unhealthy meal today, the scale doesn't really move much. But when repeated, small decisions become toxic results. That said, it doesn't matter if you're unsuccessful or successful right now. What matters is the habits you do and whether they are pushing you in the right direction towards success or not. How your habits shape your identity and vice versa. Why is it so hard to repeat bad habits and harder to make good ones? Even if we have the best intentions, bad habits stick around once established. We try to change them, but we most likely fail because 1. We try to change the wrong things, and 2. We don't do it the right way. Many people begin the process of change by focusing on what they want to accomplish. This takes us to outcome-based habits. But if we started to build identity-based habits, we start focusing on who we want to become. Imagine, for example, 2 people saying no to a cigarette. The first person, when offered a cigarette, says, "No thank you, I'm trying to quit." Sounds reasonable, but this person believes they are a smoker who wants to be something else. They are wishing for a change in their behavior while still having the same beliefs. The second person declines as well, but says, "No thank you, I'm not a smoker." Small difference, but changes their identity. Most people never even think of identity change when wanting to make an improvement. The more proud you are with one aspect of who you are, the more motivated you are going to be to keep the new habits around. And all you need to do is decide who you want to become and prove it to yourself with tiny changes. How to build better habits in 4 simple steps. In 1898, Edward Thorndike, a psychologist, conducted an experiment that found how we currently understand habits and the rules that lead to our behavior. Edward had great interest in studying the behavior of animals, and he started with cats. He would put each cat inside a device known as a puzzle box. This box was designed so that any cat could easily escape through a door by one simple act, like pressing a lever or pulling a loop of cord. Most cats wanted to get out as soon as they were put inside the box. At first they would poke their nose into corners, put their paws through any opening. But after a few minutes of exploration, they found the lever, and the door would open. After 20 to 30 trials of tracking their behaviors each time, it became so automatic and habitual for the cats to press the lever within seconds of putting them into the box. With practice, cats made less mistakes and began focusing on the solution. From his studies, Thorndike described the learning process by stating, "Behaviors followed by satisfying results tend to be repeated, and those who produce unfavorable consequences are less likely to be repeated." The process of creating a habit can be divided into 4 easy steps: cue, craving, response, and reward. The cue triggers your brain to start a behavior. It's the kind of information that predicts a reward, and because the cue is the first sign of rewards, it usually leads to craving. Cravings are a motivational force. Without some sort of desire, we have not enough reason to take action. You do not crave smoking a cigarette. You crave the relief it gives you. In third place comes the response. It's the actual habit you make, which can be in the form of thought of action. Whether there is an actual response or not depends on how motivated you are. Lastly, a response brings a reward. It's basically the goal of any habit. The cue is about noticing the reward. The craving is about desiring the reward. The response is about getting the reward. If a behavior is not enough in any of these 4 stages, it will never become a habit. The first law: make it obvious. The man who didn't look right. I was once told a story about a woman who spent years working as a paramedic who went to a family gathering. Once she arrived at the event, she took one glance at her father-in-law and got very concerned. She told him she doesn't like the way he looked and that he has to go to the hospital immediately. A few hours later, he was undergoing a life-saving surgery after it was revealed that a major artery was blocked and there was a risk of a heart attack. The human brain is like a prediction machine. It's always taking in your surroundings and analyzing every little thing you come across. Whenever you repeatedly go through something like a paramedic seeing the face of a heart attack patient, your brain starts noticing and focusing on what's important. And with enough practice, you can notice the cues that predict certain results without even realizing it. The cues that cause our habits to become so common that they are invisible. But before we can begin building new habits, we need to work on the ones we currently have. And this can be somewhat hard because they are mostly automatic habits since they have been in your life for a long time. The biggest challenge is being aware of what you actually do. And in order to do so, you need to make a list of your daily habits. And once you have a full list, scan each behavior and ask yourself whether this habit is good, bad, or neutral. Score your habits, but there is no need to change anything yet. This is simply acknowledgement of what you do. Don't blame yourself for faults. Don't praise yourself for successes. The process of behavior change always begins with awareness. The best way to start a new habit. In 2001, researchers in Great Britain began working with 248 individuals to build better exercise habits throughout the course of 2 weeks. The first group was the control group. All they had to do was track how many times they exercise. The second group was the motivation group. They were asked to track their exercises and also read some books about the advantages of exercise. Moreover, the researchers explained to them how working out decreases the risk of coronary heart disease and improves heart health. Lastly, the third group received the same presented data as the second group, which means they had equal levels of motivation. However, they were asked to create a plan for when and where they will exercise. And to be more specific, each member of the third group wrote the following sentence: "During the week, I will partake in at least 20 minutes of vigorous exercise on a particular day, at a particular time, in a particular place." In the first and second groups, 35 to 38% worked out at least once per week. Apparently, the motivational presentation had no meaningful impact. But 91% of the third group worked out at least once per week. The sentence which they wrote is what researchers call implementation intention, which is a plan you make beforehand about when and where to take action. Many researchers have proved that the implementation intention is effective for sticking to our goals. Many people believe that they don't have motivation, but the truth is they don't have clarity. It's not obvious when and where to act. The first law of behavior is to make it obvious. Being obvious is a practical way to have clear cues for your habits and be able to design a plan for when and where to act. Motivation is overrated. Environment often matters more. A primary care physician at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston named Annie Thorndike got a crazy idea. She had a belief that she can make the eating habits of the hospital staff and visitors better without changing their motivation, not even discussing it with them. She and her colleagues conducted a 6-month study to change the choice architecture of the hospital cafeteria. They changed the arrangements of the drinks first. The refrigerators were located near the cash registers and were only filled with soda. They changed that. They added bottled waters, not only in refrigerators, but also along the food stations in the room. Soda was still in the main refrigerators, but water is now available everywhere. Over the next 3 months, the soda sales declined by 11.4%. Meanwhile, sales of bottled water were raised by 25.8%. They made the same change to the food in the cafeteria and saw the same results, and no one noticed anything. People usually choose what they buy or what they eat not because of what they are, but because where they are. If you walk into the kitchen and find a plate of cookies, you will eat half of it even if you hadn't been thinking about them or even felt hungry. Your habits simply change depending on where you are and the cues that are in front of you. Environment is considered an invisible hand that forms human behavior. No matter how different our personalities are, some behaviors come forth over and over again under specific environmental conditions. Unfortunately, the environments where we live and work make it hard to do specific actions because there's an obvious cue to trigger the behavior. If you want to make a habit a main part of your life, make the cue a main part of your environment. The secret to self-control. In 1971, as the Vietnam War was going into its 16th year, Congressman Robert Steele from Connecticut and Morgan Murphy from Illinois made a discovery that astonished the American public. On their visit to the troops, they had learned that almost 15% of US soldiers stationed there are heroin addicts. Follow-up research showed that 35% of service members in Vietnam had tried heroin and 20% were addicted. This discovery led to the creation of the Special Action Office of Drug Abuse Prevention to prevent and rehabilitate service members when they returned home. Lee Robbins was a researcher in charge, and he showed the addictions could spontaneously disappear if there was a radical change in the environment. The soldiers in Vietnam spent all the time surrounded by cues that triggered heroin use. It was easily accessible, the stress of war, they were friends with heroin users, fellow soldiers, and they were far away from home. But once the soldiers returned home, they found themselves in an environment that had no such cues, and so the habits changed. The Vietnam study ran counter to many of the cultural beliefs we have about bad habits. The idea that only a tiny bit of discipline would be the solution to all problems is what our culture is all about. But recent research showed something different. When scientists observed people who had tremendous self-control, they found they are not very different from the ones struggling. Instead, disciplined people are better at their lives because they don't put themselves in tempting situations. The people who are the most self-controlled are the ones who least use control. It's easier to practice self-control when you don't have to always use it. In other words, it's not self-control that ends bad habits. Your energy must be directed into something more powerful, like optimizing your environment. Make the cues of your good habits obvious and the cues of the bad habits invisible. The second law: make it attractive. How to make a habit irresistible. An electrical engineering student in Dublin, Ireland, named Ronan Byrne enjoyed watching Netflix, but he also knew that he should do his exercises. So he got the idea of hacking his stationary bike and connecting it to the laptop and TV. Then he created a computer program that would only allow Netflix to work if he was cycling at a certain speed. He was employing temptation bundling to make his exercise habit more attractive. How does it work? It works by connecting an action you want to do with an action you need to do. Temptation bundling is a way to apply a psychology theory known as Premack's principle. The principle basically states that even if you don't really want to do something, you'll become conditioned to do it if it means getting something you really want along the way. It's all about making a habit attractive or favorable without having to leave something in return. Role of family and friends in shaping your habits. We don't choose our first habits, we imitate them. We follow our friends and family, our church, our school, our local community, and our society. Each culture and each group come with its own set of standards, and it affects our habits. We imitate the people close to us. We pick up habits from them. We copy how our parents handle arguments and fights, and the way our co-workers do this and get that. It's a known rule that when you are close to someone, you will most probably imitate their habits. One study observed that someone's chances of becoming obese is raised to 57% if they have a friend who became obese and vice versa. Our friends and family are an invisible peer pressure, and it pulls us in the direction they are going. But of course, peer pressure is only bad when you're surrounded with bad influences. The best thing to do is to join a culture where your habits are welcomed and encouraged. How to find and fix the causes of your bad habits. You can make any hard habit much easier if you learn to link it with a positive mindset. For example, we always talk about the things we have to do. But what if we changed just one word? What if instead of saying, "I have to get up to work," you said, "I get to wake up for work"? you get to cook for your family. By a simple change of words, you change an entire perspective. This way, you highlight the benefits of your habits and not their setbacks and disadvantages. The secret to finding and fixing what causes your bad habits is to reframe the associations you have about them. So you can change a hard habit into an attractive one. The third law: make it easy. Walk slowly, but never backward. Forming a habit is a process in which one behavior becomes an automatic reflex through repetition. Repetition of a habit leads to clear physical changes in the brain. For example, in musicians, the cerebellum is larger than it is in non-musicians. Every time you repeat an action, you are activating a specific neural circuit associated with that habit. There is no magic about time passing in regard to habit formation. Time was never a problem. What matters is the rate at which you perform the behavior. You could do something 2 times in 40 days or 200 times. It's not the time, but the frequency. To create a habit, you must practice it. The law of least effort. Energy is valuable, and the brain is designed to conserve it whenever possible. It's a human nature to follow the law of least effort, which states that when people have to decide between 2 similar choices, they will naturally go to the one that requires the least amount of work. Every action demands a certain amount of energy, and the more energy is needed, the less likely it is to happen. And in some sense, every habit is just an obstacle to reaching what you really want. Diet is an obstacle to getting fit. Meditation is an obstacle to calmness. You never actually want the habit itself, but the outcome it delivers. But if we are all so lazy, how do some people accomplish hard things? The solution is to create an environment where doing the right thing is always easy, by reducing the friction of the obstacle, just like meal delivery services decrease the friction of shopping for groceries. Dating apps lessen the friction of making social introductions, and so on. The battle of creating better habits comes down to exploring ways to reduce the friction associated with good habits and increase the friction associated with our bad ones. How to stop procrastinating by using the 2-minute rule. Even if you want to start too big, and even if it's easy to start with big steps, you still should start with baby steps. You always try to do too much too soon because of how excited you are about change. But there's one tendency to stop you from doing that, and that is the 2-minute rule, which states, when you begin a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do. You'll discover that almost any habit can be toned down to a 2-minute version. Like, read before bed every night becomes read 1 page. Do 30 minutes of yoga becomes take out my yoga mat. The point is to make it easy to start doing a particular habit. You can meditate for 1 minute, read 1 page, and put 1 item of clothing away. The point is, you started. It's a powerful strategy to continue doing the right thing. People might think it's weird to be hyped about reading 1 page of a book. But the point is not how much you do, but actually showing up to do it. And once you master the art of showing up, the first 2 minutes simply become a ritual at the beginning of a larger routine. This is actually the ideal way to master a difficult skill. At some point, once you've created the habit and you show up every day, you can mix the 2-minute rule with the habit shaping technique, which scales your habit towards your ultimate goal. After establishing a habit, advance to an intermediate step and repeat the process until you master it. Then move on to the next level. Eventually, you'll find yourself with the habit you had originally hoped to build. How to make good habits inevitable and bad habits impossible. In the summer of 1830, Victor Hugo, a French author, was facing an impossible deadline. He had promised his publisher a new book 12 months earlier, but he failed to write it. Instead, he spent the year working on other projects and delayed his work. It made Hugo's publisher frustrated, so he set the deadline less than 6 months away. Hugo had to finish the book by February 1831. How did he concentrate and succeed in writing his book before the deadline? He, strangely enough, collected all of his clothes and gave them to an assistant and asked him to lock them away. That way, he had no clothes to go out and remained in his place and wrote furiously during the fall and winter of 1830. The book, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, was published 2 weeks early on January 14th, 1831. Sometimes success isn't about making good habits easy, but about making bad habits hard. The fourth law: make it satisfying. The cardinal rule of behavior change. We are more likely to repeat a behavior when the experience is satisfying, which is entirely logical. Pleasure, even from small things, sends signals to the brain that this feels good. Repeat it next time. Take, for example, chewing gums. Early versions of gums were only bland raisins, chewy but not tasty. But that was until 1891, where it revolutionized and flavors were added to it, which makes it also logical that if another experience was not satisfying, there will be no reason to repeat it. This is what the cardinal rule states. What is rewarded is repeated, and what is punished is avoided. But this rule is tricky. We don't just look for any type of satisfaction. We are looking for immediate satisfaction. All habits produce various outcomes across time, and these outcomes are usually misaligned. For bad habits, the immediate outcome usually feels good, but the ultimate outcome feels bad, and vice versa with good habits. A reward that is certain right now is usually worth more than the one that is possible in the future. The desire for instant satisfaction makes people spend all their time trying to find quick hits of immediate pleasure. But what we are really talking about here when we discuss immediate rewards is the ending of a behavior. You want to end a bad habit and you want it to feel satisfying, because change is easy when it is enjoyable. How to stick with good habits every day. Benjamin Franklin, at age 20, carried a small booklet everywhere he went and used it to keep track of his 13 personal virtues. The list had goals like lose no time and be always employed in something useful. At the end of each day, he would open the list and record the progress he made. It's what we call a habit tracker, an easy way to measure whether you did a habit or not. Habit tracking is powerful because it uses the multiple laws of behavior change. It makes a behavior obvious because every time you open up the list, it's right there in front of you. And one more action brings another. Habit tracking makes a habit attractive because the most effective form of motivation is progress, and it makes a habit satisfying. I'm sure everyone knows how satisfying it is to cross an item off of your to-do list. It feels good to watch the results grow, which is why habit tracking is crucial to stay motivated and keep an eye on the goals you want to reach. How an accountability partner can change everything. Just as we probably repeat an experience when it ends well, we probably also avoid an experience when the ending is painful. Pain is an effective teacher. If a failure is painful, we fix it. If a failure has no effect on us, we ignore it. The more immediate and costly a mistake is, the faster we learn from it. For example, the fear of a bad review forces an employee to do well on their job. When the consequences are extreme, people learn quickly, which is why sometimes having an accountability partner helps. Because knowing that there's someone watching over you can be motivating and powerful. You are less likely to delay work if there's an immediate cost. And if you delay your work, your boss, for example, will see that you're lazy and untrustworthy. We care about the opinions of those around us and those who can help us climb to the top, which is why having a partner like that can work very well. Advanced tactics: how to go from being merely good to being truly great. After you've mastered a habit, after a lot of practice, it becomes boring and more of a routine. Once you've reached what you wanted, your interest fades. The greatest challenge to success is boredom. We get bored with habits because they stop giving us satisfaction and we always expect the outcome. But the truth is, it doesn't matter what you are trying to get better at if you only do it when it feels exciting, because then you'll never stay consistent enough to achieve any great results. Yes, there will be days you'll feel like quitting, but showing up when it's painful and exhausting and boring, that's what makes a difference between amateurs and professionals. The only way to excel at what you do is to stay fascinated with doing the same thing over and over again. There's just one downside to habits, which is getting used to doing things that you don't notice small errors. You get used to doing something that you only reinforce it, not improve it. While it's not always a cause of worry, because some habits don't need constant improvements. For example, how you tie your shoes. But when you want to master something, habits are not enough. You must practice until you achieve certain skills. What you need is a way to remain alarmed of your performance over time, so you can be able to improve yourself. Don't fall into the trap of locking yourself in old patterns of thinking and acting. Life is constantly changing, and so are your habits and beliefs. Be careful of lack of self-awareness. So I hope you like the summary as well as our efforts behind it. And if you think we were able to create valuable content for you, you can show your love by giving a review. Jai Hind.